Hello everyone, and welcome to my Sister Wives For You channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The whispers that had been swirling for months in Sister Wives circles finally erupted into a full-blown storm when shocking reports claimed that the bank authorities had moved in and officially confiscated Kody Brown's house for non-payment of the loan. A devastating blow that not only rattled his already fractured family, but also cast an enormous shadow over the entire Brown brand that had once been marketed as a symbol of polygamous success, but now appeared to be crumbling under the weight of debt, broken marriages, and Kody's own financial mismanagement. And for longtime viewers who had followed the family's journey from Utah to Las Vegas and eventually to Flagstaff, this moment felt like the inevitable result of years of risky financial decisions, overextended credit lines, and grandiose dreams that never quite materialized, because Kody had long painted himself as the master planner, the visionary who insisted on uprooting his family at the drop of a hat, first pushing them into expensive custom-built homes in Las Vegas that drained their resources, then convincing them to uproot once more to Flagstaff with promises of building a sprawling family compound on Coyote Pass, promises that turned into dust when legal disputes, unpaid taxes, and endless squabbles left the land sitting vacant and the family divided. And though TLC cameras often softened the reality, fans had spotted the cracks in his empire long ago, noting how Christine walked away, how Janelle admitted she was left with virtually nothing, how Mary carved her independence through her bed and breakfast and business ventures, and how even Robin, once thought to be Kody's favorite, was allegedly struggling to keep up with the bills of her massive house that became a burden rather than a blessing. And now, with reports emerging that the bank had finally had enough and repossessed one of Kody's prized properties, the whispers of bankruptcy turned into roars of confirmation that the man who once strutted with golden curls flowing in the wind and confidence oozing from his every word was now brought to his knees by the very financial system he once bragged he could outsmart. Because let's not forget, Kody often portrayed himself as the savvy businessman, telling his wives and children that he knew how to play the system, how to negotiate loans, how to secure big properties while maintaining multiple households. Yet behind the curtain there were mounting bills, delinquent taxes, and rumors that certain loans had gone unpaid for far too long. And while TLC has remained silent on the matter, fan forums exploded with theories, screenshots of county records, and claims that liens had been placed on multiple properties, with the most shocking claim being that the house Kody shared with Robin, the one he fought tooth and nail to secure despite objections from the other wives, was the very property now allegedly seized by the bank, symbolizing the complete collapse of the future he had envisioned. And the timing could not be worse as Sister Wives teeters on the edge of cancellation, with ratings dropping and storylines becoming repetitive, because without the steady paycheck from TLC, the Browns have little left to fall back on except scattered side businesses that barely scratch the surface of their mounting financial obligations. And the optics of Kody, once the patriarch of a sprawling polygamous family empire, now facing bankruptcy and eviction, are not just devastating for him personally, but also humiliating in the public eye, especially when Christine and Janelle are out there thriving, showing off their new lives, posting about health, love, and personal growth, while Kody is left clutching at straws and defending what little reputation he has left. And for fans who have watched the rise and fall of Kody Brown, this latest twist feels like poetic justice, a karmic reckoning for years of arrogance, favoritism, and financial recklessness. Though the long-term consequences remain to be seen, because if indeed the bank has seized his home, the question arises, where will Kody and Robin go now? Will they downsize to a modest rental? Will Robin's children be forced to adjust once again to instability? Will Kody finally acknowledge that his dream of building a polygamous empire has ended? Or will he stubbornly continue the charade by seeking yet another television deal or a reality show that spins his downfall into entertainment? Because let's face it, Kody has always been more showman than strategist, more concerned with appearances than sustainability, and this moment of repossession, bank authorities marching in to take what is owed, is the starkest reminder. Yet that reality catches up to everyone, even those who believe they are untouchable. And as the dust settles, one thing becomes abundantly clear: the Brown family saga once defined by togetherness and resilience, has now been rewritten as a cautionary tale about hubris, excess, and the dangers of putting faith in a patriarch who promised the world but couldn't even keep a roof over his own head. Staring at the foreclosure notice in his shaking hands, Kody perched on the edge of his shabby couch. Tears filled his eyes and obscured the words, but he knew what it said without having to read it again. He had been living in the house for the last 15 years, and the bank had given him till the end of the week to leave. It was more than simply a house. It was the place where he had formed a life, celebrated birthdays, lamented losses, and nurtured his daughter, Lila. Now, like everything else, it was vanishing piece by piece. Although Kody could descend further into the chaos of his life if he so desired, the trouble began 3 years ago. He had always been a diligent worker who, after the death of his wife, Mara, took on double shifts at the car business to support Lila. She passed away from cancer very rapidly, leaving Kody, a 32-year-old single father with a 7-year-old who didn't understand why her mother wasn't returning home. Even with insurance, the medical expenditures mounted more quickly than he could afford them. In the hopes that he would ultimately catch up, he took out a second mortgage on the house to pay for the expenses. He was mistaken. Kody spent more than 10 years working at an auto shop that began to lose customers. Traditional mechanics were no longer as necessary with the rise of electric vehicles and automatic repair systems. Even though Kody was pretty good at his work, it didn't matter when the clients stopped coming in. After reducing his hours, the shop fired him completely. He occasionally found odd employment, but nothing consistent. But the invoices continued to arrive. He couldn't bring himself to take away Lila's dance lessons, her school supplies, her mortgage, or her utilities. She was entitled to something commonplace, something to cling to. Kody made an effort to make loan payments on time, but it was like trying to save a sinking ship with a teaspoon. Late notices became threats, then cautions. He pleaded for extensions and engaged in negotiations with the bank, but they refused to budge. As if he hadn't spent restless nights reliving every choice that brought him to this point, they would say, "You signed the contract." This was different from the cold, impersonal banks he had always imagined. It seemed like they were punishing him for having the audacity to believe he could stay afloat. Lila, who is now 16, was unaware of the severity of their predicament. When she talked about going to college or her aspirations to become a choreographer, Kody put on a smile to protect her as best he could. He didn't want her to bear the consequences of his mistakes. She wasn't foolish, though. She observed how he avoided calls from unidentified numbers and the unopened invoices on the kitchen counter. More than anything else, he was devastated that she had ceased requesting concert tickets and new outfits. Even though she was making a discreet effort to assist, he felt as like he was failing her. Kody was working on an old carburetor he had saved from a junkyard in the garage on the day the bank representatives arrived. He was merely keeping his hands occupied to prevent his thoughts from going into overdrive, not even working on any particular project. There was a harsh, forceful knock on the door. On his porch, 2 suit-clad men held a stack of documents and clipboards. They didn't make an effort to be nice. "Mister, we're here to let you know that the bank is moving forward with the foreclosure, Brennan," one of them remarked flatly. "You must leave the property by Friday." Kody felt sick to his stomach. Even though he had anticipated this, hearing it aloud made it seem genuine. He hated how desperate he sounded when he continued, "I just need a little more time. I'm trying to find employment. I'll receive the funds." The other man gave a headshake. "Mr. Brennan, you've had time. The bank has shown a great deal of patience." "Is the patient?" Kody felt like screaming. For months, they had harassed him, written to him, called him, and assessed late fines, which only made his situation worse. He didn't mention any of it, though. His jaw clenched, he simply nodded, and observed them making their way back to their vehicle. He felt the weight of the house as they drove away, including the backyard where Lila used to play, the chipped paint on the walls, and the creaking staircase. Though it wasn't much, it belonged to him. It wasn't now, though. Kody seated Lila at the kitchen table that evening. He had practiced his remarks, but they felt insufficient and incorrect. Finally, in a harsh voice, he stated, "We're going to have to move, kiddo. The house is being taken by the bank." Lila's eyes grew wide, but she refrained from crying. She simply stared at him, looking for something in his face, perhaps hope, or a clue that he had a plan. "Where will we travel?" quietly, she inquired. Kody lied, saying, "I'm working on it." He had no strategy. His credit was ruined, his finances were gone, and his few remaining friends were unable to help him. He had researched flats, but without a reliable source of income, even the most affordable ones were unaffordable. He thought about taking Lila to the shelter downtown, but the idea made his chest hurt. That was not fair to her. The days that followed were a haze of anxiety and packing. Kody went through their possessions and made decisions about what to sell and what to keep. Even if the furniture was old, it might be worth a few dollars. He couldn't bring himself to part with Mara's old jewelry or Lila's newborn clothing. As though they might eventually have a place to be stored, he carefully labeled and packaged them. When Lila wasn't at school, she helped, but there was a heavy stillness in place of her regular talk. That was what Kody detested the most. The house was almost deserted by Thursday. Kody had packed the remainder into a rented storage container that he wasn't sure he could afford beyond the first month, sold what he could, and given away what he couldn't. He had discovered a seedy motel on the outskirts of town with a flickering neon sign and dirty carpets that rented rooms by the week. For the time being, it was all he could do. It wasn't a house, but it was a roof. The bank dispatched someone to supervise the last walkthrough on Friday morning. This time it was a lady, younger than Kody had anticipated, with a clipboard and smiling courteously but aloofly. As Kody and Lila stood at the driveway with their suitcases, she went about the house, crossing things off her list. No one approached to bid them farewell, but the neighbors peered out from behind the curtains. They weren't blamed by Kody. If someone has lost everything, what would you say to them? Something broke inside Kody as the woman locked the front door for the last time. He was angry and wanted to question why life had to be so unjust and to demand answers. However, he didn't. They dragged their bags as they walked to the bus station after he took Lila's hand. Kody stared out the window the entire 30-minute ride to the motel, trying to figure out what would happen next. There were 2 twin beds and a bathroom with a slight mildew odor in the tiny motel room. Kody noticed the tension in Lila's eyes, but she didn't voice any complaints. He realized she was merely trying to keep busy when she placed her laptop on the swaying desk and pretended to be working on her assignments. Kody promised himself that night while they were eating takeaway from a neighboring diner, he would figure out a way to get out of this. For Lila as well as for him. He would stop at nothing to give her the future she so richly deserved. The ensuing weeks were tedious. Kody worked at any job he could find, including greasy spoon dishwashing, office cleaning, and package delivery. He persisted even though the pay was insufficient to pay for meals and the lodging. Despite the fact that most establishments were not recruiting, he applied to every mechanic position he could locate. In an attempt to learn something new and earn more money, he even looked into retraining programs. However, those programs were expensive, and he lacked money. Meanwhile, Lila plunged herself into her studies. She joined the dance team and practiced late into the night while maintaining her good grades. Kody attended every show, clapping louder than anybody else when she took the stage while seated in the back of the auditorium. It served as a reminder that not everything was lost and was the one positive aspect of their life. The burden of their predicament, however, never went away. Kody was aware that they couldn't remain in the motel indefinitely because it wasn't a house. He swallowed his pride and began researching government help, completing paperwork and attending interviews. He accomplished it, even though it was a slow and embarrassing procedure. For Lila always. After several months, Kody started to see signs of improvement. Kody enrolled in a free HVAC technician training class given by a nearby community center. Although it wasn't glamorous, the demand was tremendous and the employment was steady. In the faint light of the motel lamp, he studied at night after Lila had gone to bed, going through manuals. Although he was worn out, he felt as though he was making progress for the first time in years. Lila sat down beside Kody one evening while he was going over his notes. "Dad," she continued in a gentle yet stern voice, "I understand that things are difficult. But you have my admiration." Kody's throat became constricted. He simply stretched across the table and squeezed her hand since he was at a loss for words. He believed that perhaps, just possibly, they would be all right for the first time in a long time. A job offer resulted from the training program. It was with a tiny company, but it was a nice one, offering perks and a respectable starting salary. Kody accepted it without question. Although it wasn't enough to reclaim their home, it was sufficient to move into a modest apartment with a functional kitchen and a bedroom for Lila. They laughed like they hadn't in years as they had pizza and a movie to celebrate their first night there. Even now, the foreclosure still hurt. Kody will always remember the pain of losing his house, where he had established his life with Lila and Mara. But he knew they had made it through the hardest when he saw his daughter dance across their small living room, her smile bigger than ever. They remained together, battling and present. And it was sufficient. It took time for life to get easier. Kody was still working long hours, had expenses to pay, and occasionally had flashbacks that caused him to second-guess every decision he had made. However, Lila had him, and he had her. They would deal with whatever came next as a team. Their house had been taken by the bank, but their fortitude was unaffected. Kody clung to that idea as he gradually put their life back together. Although he was unsure of what was ahead, he was confident that they would confront it head-on. For Lila, for Mara, for himself.